In the old days, our ancestors knew that some promises are written in blood, and some curses last longer than the mountains themselves. They understood that a man's greatest strength can become his deepest weakness, and that love, when twisted by desperation, can birth the most terrible betrayals. Today, I share with you a story that has been whispered around fires for countless generations, a story that shows how pride can turn a father's love into his son's greatest enemy. Cameri had stood for over 300 years, its mud brick homes arranged in perfect circles around the sacred meeting ground. The baobab trees whispered secrets to those brave enough to listen during the darkest hours of night, and the wind carried warnings that most people ignored until it was too late. Moges stood tall among his people like a giant among children. At 45, he was the village's greatest hunter, a man whose spear never missed its mark and whose name was spoken with reverence in 5 neighboring villages. His shoulders were broad like the trunk of an ancient tree, his hands steady as mountain stone, and his voice commanded respect from every soul in Cameri, from the smallest child to the eldest grandmother. When he walked through the village, children would stop their games to watch, and young hunters would bow their heads in respect. But Moges carried a secret shame that ate at his heart like a terrible sickness. His son, Tayeo, had never killed even a rabbit. While other fathers boasted about their sons' hunting skills, Moges could only lower his head in embarrassment. 20-year-old Tayeo sat by the flowing river, watching his reflection ripple in the clear water like a broken dream. The sound of the current reminded him of all the times he had disappointed his father, each failure flowing away but never forgotten. His hands were gentle where they should be firm, his heart soft where it should be hard. While other young men his age brought home antelope and buffalo for their families, Tayeo returned empty-handed every single day, his spear clean and unused. "Father, I have tried with all my strength," Tayeo would say each evening, his voice heavy with shame. Moges would turn away, his jaw tight with disappointment, his fists clenched in frustration. A man who cannot hunt cannot lead his people. A man who cannot lead is no man at all. You bring shame to our family name. The words cut deeper than any blade could ever reach. Tayeo loved his father more than life itself, more than the sun loved the sky, but he could never make his hands steady enough to take a life. Something deep inside his soul rebelled against causing death, even for survival. Each night, he would pray to the ancestors to change his heart, to make him the hunter his father needed him to be. But the prayers seemed to disappear into the darkness without answers. Elder Zutatu called the village to gather under the great baobab tree, her walking stick tapping against the hard earth like a drum beating a warning. At 70 years old, she was as wise as the ancient spirits themselves, her white hair braided with sacred beads that had seen 3 generations of births, deaths, and secrets. "The dry season grows longer each year," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "The animals move farther from our lands. The rivers run lower. Our hunters must bring more meat, or children will starve when the hard months come." The men nodded gravely, understanding the weight of her words. Families were already eating smaller portions. The granaries held less grain than in previous years. The old and young were growing thin. All eyes turned to Moges, the greatest hunter among them. If anyone could solve this problem, it would be him. "I will provide for our people," Moges declared, standing tall and strong. "My family has never failed this village, and we never will." But in his heart, he knew a terrible truth that kept him awake at night. He was getting older. His eyes were not as sharp as they once were. His legs did not carry him as far or as fast. Soon, very soon, the village would need Tayeo to take his place as the chief hunter. And Tayeo could not kill even the smallest creature. That night, as Moges lay troubled in his hut, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, a figure appeared in his doorway like smoke given form. It was an old woman, bent and twisted with age, her clothes made of darkness and her eyes like burning coals in a dying fire. "You seek to make your son a hunter," she whispered, her voice like wine through a graveyard. Moges sat up, his warrior instincts alert despite his fear. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I am one who knows your pain, Moges, son of Dakari. I have watched you for many seasons, seen your shame grow like a cancer in your chest. I can give your son the greatest hunting power in all of Africa. Power beyond imagination. Her smile was like a crack in the earth, revealing depths that no living thing should see. But every gift has a price, and this price is higher than most men can pay. Moges felt ice in his veins, but desperation made him brave. What price? The price is simple but terrible. When the time comes, you must choose between your son and your village. Choose wrong, and both will be destroyed forever. What do you mean by choice? Moges demanded, though every instinct screamed at him to send this creature away. The old woman's laugh was like wine through dry bones, empty and haunting. Your son will become the greatest hunter who ever lived. Animals will fall at his feet. His name will be sung in villages across all of Africa. But power always demands payment. She moved closer, and Moges could smell death and decay on her breath. On his 21st birthday, the curse I place on him will demand satisfaction. He must kill the thing he loves most in this world, or a curse will fall on your entire village that will make the earth open up and swallow every living soul. Moges felt his world spinning. And if he kills what he loves most? Then the village is saved, but he must live forever with that blood on his hands. Love is often the greatest enemy of survival, Moges. Sometimes, to save many, one must sacrifice everything. Moges should have sent her away. Any wise man would have refused. But the thought of his son's daily shame, the whispers of the villagers, the approaching famine, all of it burned in his chest like poison. I accept, he whispered, the words falling from his lips like stones into a deep well. The old woman smiled and touched Tayeo's sleeping form with one gnarled finger. Dark energy flowed from her like black water, seeping into the young man's body through his skin. It is done, Moges, son of Dakari. Remember my words, when the time comes, love will be your greatest enemy. The next morning brought changes that seemed impossible. Tayeo woke with new strength flowing through his arms like liquid fire, and his eyes burned with a hunter's instinct that had never been there before. When he picked up his spear, it felt light as a feather in his hands. When he looked at the forest, he could see trails and signs that had been invisible to him just one day earlier. His muscles felt like steel cables, and his mind was sharp as a blade. He returned that evening with 3 antelope, 2 rabbits, and a young buffalo, more meat than most hunters brought home in a week. The village stared in amazement as he laid the animals at his father's feet. The village erupted in celebration. Tayeo has become a man, they cheered, lifting him on their shoulders. The spirits have blessed him. Young women who had never looked at him before now watched him with admiring eyes. Children followed him through the village, begging for hunting stories. The elders nodded their approval and spoke of how he would make a fine leader one day. Moges watched his son accept their praise with humble grace, and for the first time in years, his chest swelled with pride. His son was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. Father taught me everything I know, he would say when people asked about his sudden skill. All honor belongs to him. Moges would smile at his son's words, his heart swelling with love and pride. But the old woman's promise haunted his sleep like a fever dream. When the time comes, you must choose between your son and your village. What did it mean? What terrible choice would he have to make? And when would that time come? As Tayeo's 21st birthday approached, strange and terrible things began happening in Kamari village. The river that had run clear for generations suddenly turned red as blood every sunset. Birds fell from the sky for no reason, their bodies found scattered throughout the village each morning. The village's children started having nightmares about a great darkness coming to swallow them all. They would wake screaming about shadows with teeth and voices that called their names from empty air. The crops began to wither even though the rains had been good. Animals avoided the village lands as if something evil lived there. Even the dogs would whimper and hide when night fell. Elder Zutatu called Moges to her hut, her ancient face creased with worry lines deeper than he had ever seen. Sacred bones and protective charms covered every surface, but even they seemed powerless against whatever was coming. "There is evil magic at work in our village," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "I can smell it on the wind like rotting flesh. Something unnatural has been awakened, and it grows stronger every day." Mogs' hands shook as he tried to keep his voice steady. "What kind of evil magic?" "The kind that demands blood payment," she replied, her eyes looking through him as if seeing into the spirit world. "The kind that comes when someone makes bargains they should never have made. When such bargains are broken, entire villages can disappear from the earth as if they never existed." Almaray, the village healer, came to Mogs with news that made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Her face was pale with fear, and her hands trembled as she clutched her medicine bag. "I have seen this curse before," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In my grandmother's time, when I was still a small child, a similar darkness fell on a village 3 days east of here." "What happened to them?" Mogs asked, though he dreaded the answer. "When the curse was complete, the earth opened like a great mouth and swallowed every living soul, men, women, children, animals, even the insects and worms. Only bones remain there now, bleached white by the sun. Nothing grows on that cursed ground. Even birds refuse to fly over it." Almaray gripped his arm with fingers like claws. "My grandmother told me the curse can only be stopped by great sacrifice. Someone who loves deeply must choose to destroy what they love most. Only blood freely given by love can break such dark magic." Mogs felt his world collapse around him like a house built on sand. Now he understood. The old woman had trapped him perfectly in her web of evil. There was no escape, no way to save everyone he cared about. The old woman appeared to Mogs again, materializing from shadow like a nightmare made flesh. It was 3 days before Tayeo's 21st birthday, and the evil in the air had grown so thick it was hard to breathe. "You remember our agreement, Mogs son of Dakari," she said, her voice like poison honey. "The time has come for payment." Mogs fell to his knees, all his pride as a great hunter crumbling into dust. "Please, I beg you. Take my life instead. Take my soul. Take anything you want, but spare my son and my village. The magic doesn't work that way, foolish man. The spell I wove can only be satisfied in one specific way. Your son must kill what he loves most on his 21st birthday at sunset, or everyone in this village will die. Everyone except him. He will live forever, watching the bones of his people turn to dust, knowing he could have saved them." Mogs felt tears burning his eyes. "What does he love most?" "You, of course. He loves you more than his own life, more than the sun and moon and stars. That pure love is what makes this curse so delicious. To save everyone else, he must murder the father he adores." The old woman's laughter echoed through the hut like breaking glass. "Unless, of course, you can make him stop loving you before the time comes. But love like this doesn't die easily, does it?" Mog spent 2 sleepless days and nights thinking, his mind turning like a trapped animal looking for escape. If Tayeo killed him, the curse would be broken and the village would be saved. But Tayeo would have to live forever with the guilt of murdering his own father. How could any son survive such a burden? How could Mogs ask such a terrible thing of the boy he loved more than his own life? There had to be another way. There had to be some path that would save everyone without destroying Tayeo's soul. But no matter how hard he thought, no other solution came to him. On the night before Tayeo's birthday, as the evil in the air pressed down on the village like a great weight, Mogs made his choice. He would save his son from having to make this terrible decision. He would take that burden on himself. If Tayeo hated him instead of loved him, then killing him wouldn't be murder committed out of love. It would be justice for betrayal. The son's heart would break, but his soul would remain clean. It was the only gift a father could give. The next morning, as the sun rose blood-red over Kamari village, Mogs stood before the village council with a heart full of poison and lies. Every word he was about to speak would be a dagger through his own soul, but he had no choice. "I have discovered something terrible about my son," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. "Something that will shock you all." The villagers gathered quickly, confusion and concern on their faces. Tayeo had been their hero, their hope for the future. What could Moges possibly have discovered? Elder Zututu leaned forward on her walking stick, her ancient eyes narrowing. "Speak, Moges. What have you learned?" "Tayeo has been stealing meat from the village stores every night for weeks. He has been selling it to other villages for gold while our own people go hungry." The lies tasted like ashes in Moges' mouth, but he forced himself to continue. "I have proof of his betrayal." He showed them a bag of gold coins he had hidden in Tayo's sleeping place, and strips of dried meat wrapped in his son's blanket. The evidence had been carefully planted during the night. The crowd gasped in shock and horror. Their hero, their future leader, was nothing but a common thief who would steal food from hungry children. Elder Zututu shook her head sadly, her voice heavy with disappointment. "Theft from the village stores during a time of shortage is punishable by death. It is an old law, and it cannot be changed." Tayeo was brought before the council in iron chains that seemed to weigh more than mountains. His eyes searched the crowd desperately until they found his father's face, filled with confusion and pain deeper than any physical wound. "Father, you know I would never steal from our people. You raised me better than that. Why are you saying these terrible things? This evidence, someone has put it in my hut to make me look guilty." Moges forced his face to remain cold as winter stone, though his heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. Each word from his son's mouth was like a spear through his chest, but he could not show weakness now. "Because you are no son of mine," he said, making his voice as hard and cruel as possible. "You are nothing but a thief and a liar who has brought shame on our family name. I should have seen your true nature long ago." The words hit Tayeo like physical blows. The young man who had loved his father more than life itself, who had always tried so hard to make him proud, felt something precious die inside his chest. The love that had defined his entire life began to twist into something dark and poisonous. "Execute him at sunset," Moges commanded, though each word felt like swallowing broken glass. "Let justice be done before the whole village." As the sun began its final journey toward the horizon, painting the sky the color of blood and fire, Tayeo was brought to the center of the village. A great crowd had gathered to witness the execution of the fallen hero. The executioner, a grim man named Kamari who had served the village for 20 years, handed Moges the ceremonial spear. "The law is clear," he said solemnly. "A father who discovers his son's crime must finish what he started. Only then is the family honor restored." Moges took the spear with hands that shook like leaves in a storm. The weapon felt heavier than any he had ever carried, heavier than the weight of all his years. He approached his son slowly, each step like walking through deep water. Tayo's eyes held no love anymore, only hatred and betrayal burning like fires in the darkness of his soul. "Do it," Tayeo whispered, his voice filled with venom. "Kill the son who disappointed you so much. Kill the thief who brought shame to your perfect reputation. At least then you can tell everyone how you were strong enough to choose justice over blood." Moges raised the spear above his head, his muscles trembling with the effort of what he was about to do. This was the moment the curse required. Tayeo no longer loved him, he hated him with every fiber of his being. Now Tayeo would die believing his father had betrayed him, but the village would be saved from the terrible curse. The sun touched the horizon. Time was running out. But as Moges looked into his son's eyes one last time, preparing to drive the spear home, he saw something that made his heart stop beating. Behind the hatred, behind the pain and betrayal, there was still love. Even now, even after everything that had been said and done, Tayeo still loved his father. The love was wounded and bleeding, mixed with agony and disappointment, but it remained as strong as ever. Nothing could kill it completely. The old woman's laughter echoed in his mind like thunder. The curse had been perfectly designed, woven with evil intelligence that accounted for every possibility. No matter what Moges did, no matter how he tried to manipulate the situation, Tayeo's love would remain. Killing him now would still be the murder of love, and the curse would still be satisfied. Moges dropped the spear as if it had burst into flames. The weapon fell to the ground with a sound like thunder as he collapsed to his knees before his son. "Forgive me, my beloved boy. I have destroyed us all with my pride and desperation." With tears streaming down his face, he told the village the truth about the curse, about the terrible bargain he had made, about the choice that could never really be a choice. Every word was like pulling his own heart from his chest, but he could no longer live with the lies. As Moges finished his confession, the earth began to shake like a living thing in pain. Cracks appeared in the ground, spreading outward from the village center like a spider web of destruction. The old woman appeared above them, her form growing larger and more terrible with each passing second. "You have broken the bargain, Moges, son of Dakari," she shrieked, her voice like 1,000 screaming winds. "You were supposed to choose. Now everyone dies, and their blood is on your hands forever." The cracks in the earth began to widen, and a sound like the world ending came from below. The villagers screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to go. But Tayeo stood up, his chains falling away like water as the power she had given him responded to his will. Even cursed and betrayed, even facing death, he remained his father's son, brave and strong and willing to sacrifice himself for others. "No," he said quietly, his voice somehow carrying above all the chaos and destruction. "I choose differently than you planned." He picked up the fallen spear and, looking into his father's eyes with perfect love and complete forgiveness, drove the point into his own heart. "I choose to sacrifice myself for those I love," he whispered as his life flowed out onto the sacred ground. "Let my death break this curse forever." The old woman screamed in rage and frustration as her evil magic shattered like glass. She had not planned for this, a victim who would choose his own death to save others. Her form dissolved into smoke and shadow, and the cracks in the earth sealed themselves shut. The curse was broken, but the price had been paid in the most precious coin of all. Pride and desperation can make us do terrible things, even when our intentions are good. Sometimes, the very actions we take to protect our loved ones become the source of their greatest pain. Remember this story well. Share it with others, for these ancient wisdoms must not be forgotten in our modern world. Subscribe for more tales that teach us about the power of love, the danger of pride, and the strength that comes from making the right choice, even when it costs us everything we hold dear. And never, ever make bargains with darkness, no matter how sweet the promises sound.